it has its limits. Freedom of speech does. For instance, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Everyone knows that one. That's a very simple example of what you can't do. But I think the basis behind that is that freedom of speech is not the freedom to endanger with speech. And I think that's what's happening, is that someone's taking their free speech and endangering other lives with it.
Hey guys, Philosopher here, and this episode is incredibly important to me. This is about the dangers of misinformation and biased media. You read the title, you saw the thumbnail, you already know what this is about. It's an important conversation that needs to be had. I'm not saying I have all the right answers. I'm saying that the conversation needs to be started, and we need to continue to further that conversation, that dialogue, because I don't like the direction that we're going in. I don't like the way that we're handling the pandemic, the presidency, elections, a lot of different issues that are affected by our bias, by biased media, by biased content, by misinformation. This is all things that are incredibly concerning to me as I see society kind of implode on itself here in America. So I wanted to have a conversation. I brought Sumguy back. He's been a friend of mine for a long time, and we have good conversations that are more organic, and I'm able to really articulate my points and get called out on my BS. So he does a good job of calling me out when he thinks I'm wrong on stuff. And it's just a really good conversation. Also, some people were asking about his background and his where he came from, so he shares that as well. So we're going to get right into this episode, get right into the nitty gritty. Hope you guys enjoy, and thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the show.
I feel like a lot of people were asking at one point who I am and where I come from. I'm just a white boy from Northeast Alabama, and grew up poor. Left home in my mid-20s, moved across the country, found work, made friends, and got to experience a pretty severe case of what's the term? Culture shock when I moved from Alabama to San Diego, California. That probably has a lot to do with where my headspace is, but I'm actually okay with it. I'm okay with how much I've grown as a person. My growing up, my family was pretty typical Southern family. Racism all around. Pretty typical Southern family, full of hate and religion all at the same time.
Ironic.
So that's my basic rundown.
I'm going to set up a video here for context. So for those who may not be in the know, I posted a clip on my YouTube channel, and it's from a stream that I did that's also part of a podcast, but it has nothing to do with the podcast. And then I talk about my opinion, my feelings on people who aren't taking the mask situation seriously. And I want to set it up and play for you so that we can talk about the conversation that ensued afterwards. All right, so here is the video. It's really, really short. It's just a minute long. I want to play it for you guys so you can actually hear it. People who are watching the YouTube version, you should be able to see the video. Don't mind me. It's the lighting. It's bad. In this country, who are kind of being the no-maskers, to me, they feel like the flat earther has gone wrong. And I don't say that to be disrespectful, and I am completely open to the idea that, maybe masks don't make a huge difference. But right now I'm under the assumption that it does, because it has in the past with other issues that scientists, besides just mainstream media, have talked about it working. So until that news comes out otherwise from reputable sources, I'm going to believe masks are the best way to go. And as such, I feel like people who are denying the existence of COVID, denying the usefulness of masks, they feel like what happens when you let a flat earther run wild, right, and share these ideas. And it's made me really, really think about the concept of censorship and free speech, and I don't like the direction that we're going in, but I've been incredibly curious about how we're going to be able to maintain having free speech when something like this has happened. Okay, so there is the clip. For context, I want to clarify, I wasn't just talking about people who don't wear masks, but there's different levels of it as well. So there's people who just don't think wearing masks help. There's people who don't believe that COVID is actually a thing. There's people who believe that COVID is a thing, but they think it isn't as bad as people are making it out to be. Some of these are more valid than others. Some of these are more understandable or relatable, at least to me, than others. But that's how I was feeling during that live stream. I think someone had talked about it, or I was just thinking about it lately because I've been having a lot of conversations with people on multiple sides of the field on this topic. But before I get into the responses, some of the responses are what really got me motivated to do this. But for you, Sumguy, what were your thoughts on that take?
So as far as like a raw opinion coming into that video, I think it's easy to think that you're saying that we shouldn't have freedom of speech, but if you really dig down into it, that's not what it doesn't seem like that's what you're saying at all. But I think if someone's coming in not really knowing much about you and who you are, that they may think that you're vying for taking away our freedom of speech. And I feel like it's important to mention that that's not the intention. I honestly felt like it was more of a, like, how do we prevent someone from taking away our freedom of speech? Because the real difference between freedom of okay, so it has its limits. Freedom of speech does. For instance, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Everyone knows that one. That's a very simple example of what you can't do. But I think the basis behind that is that freedom of speech is not the freedom to endanger with speech. And I think that's what's happening, is that someone's taking their free speech and endangering other lives with it. How do we differentiate between what should be kept free and what should be not allowed?
Yeah, that's a good point. And the challenge with that is that there's multiple layers to the issue, because depending on where you stand with certain things, it's going to be hard to have a conversation. Like, so for the listeners, for people who are listening to this content, regardless of where you sit on this situation, everyone has to come to the table with the ability to accept someone else's worldview. And on top of that, people also have to be willing to look at information that someone else is giving them that betrays their worldview or the current information that they have, and listen to the full story before they just go back into their own worldview and think that their way is the right way, while also not offending people. And it's like, I'm not going to go out of my way to be sensitive to every single person, because I do have opinions, and I do think there's certain things that, from my point of view, are important to talk about. And I think it's important to address those things. So it's a hard topic to talk about right now because it's so heated. I know I have friends who are losing relationships with their family members because of this situation, and it's messy because part of it deals with our current president, part of it deals with the pandemic, part of this deals with the media, the news outlets and medias and content creators, and part of it deals with how people tend to be biased towards certain sources of information or certain sources, certain parties or whatever it may be. Certain groups of people, an individual tends to be biased towards one or the other. And so it's hard because there's different levels. It's like, I can offend you on the political level because I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, but if I talk bad about Republicans, automatically you might check out. Same thing with certain liberals. If I start talking about the president, who I think there's logical critiques that I can point out that has nothing to do with my political affiliation, but I think the president has done a poor job. As a leader, I think he's done a terrible job, and I could give you a breakdown analysis of all the different situations, of many of the different situations. You give me one speech, I can point out why this isn't a great speech. He has done some good ones and helped and try to have a good message, but most of the time he's self-centered. He needs acknowledgement. He doesn't ever take responsibility for the actions. He never acknowledges any mistakes that he makes, and that's a terrible sign in my opinion. He likes to blame other people and throw other people under the bus before he would take responsibility. I could go on forever. I don't want you to check out, but this is my point, is that certain people have already checked out just because of the things that I'm saying, but I could give you logical evidence. But this whole issue of the pandemic, the presidency, individuals picking and choosing their viewpoint, it's incredibly biased and emotional and not very logical at times. I can talk to people about this kind of stuff, and the reason that I equate it to flat earthers is because there's tons of information out there right now that has proven that the earth is round, right? There's a huge global conspiracy that would have to partake. That would be it would be more impossible to maintain that farce than it would be to be fake, right? It just logically, it makes more sense because it would take too much effort for that to happen. So in my mind, it's just like, it's like saying that, you know, the Easter Bunny exists or Santa Claus is real. It's like, it's kind of a novel thought that is harmless because you can't really do much about a flat earth. You know, you can try to get to the edge of the world and try to find that, but all you're going to do is find the world is round. So like, they're going to eventually prove themselves wrong. But then you have, and it's okay because they're not hurting anybody. But where is that line to where, with this pandemic, there's a certain worldview that greatly opposes. There's people who don't take this situation seriously on different levels. And now we have to have a real talk about this, because what if this happens again? This is, in my opinion, there's people who are like, hey, here's all this information proving that this pandemic isn't as big of a deal, right? I have a couple of people who commented, and for context, I don't know the person's actual name. I don't know him in person, but they commented on my channel on that clip, and they gave me just a bunch of information on different articles, quoting his sources, talking about how COVID's too small to get filtered by masks, talking about how the suicide rate is higher than COVID itself, talking about how it blocks your breathing. And there's, you know, I'll get into this in a second, but there's information that contradicts this. But let me not get ahead of myself. I want to backtrack a little bit, because part of what I want to do is I want to present opposing opinions, and I want to try to do this in a way that helps the situation while also not isolating or excluding people from the conversation, right? One of the things I'm really glad that happened was I responded to this commenter and I said, would you be willing to have a conversation with me? And they weren't willing to have a conversation verbally, but they said they'd have one via text. But for me, with something so complicated as this, it would be hard for me and time consuming to put out a bunch of text, like comments on that video. I feel like it wouldn't be as rewarding as it would be for more people to be able to be part of this conversation. So whether you're on one side of the fence or the other, I want you to be able to feel comfortable enough to talk about your opinion and explain why you believe that, not just that you're right and I'm wrong. That's incredibly important for this to work, to have us have this situation be done with. I just want the pandemic to be over, right? I want us to be safe. I don't want more people to die. And so with that, you know, he responded that he's actually a listener to my show. Like, I thought maybe he just found the clip randomly on social media, someone shared it, but he actually listens to the show and is a fan. And that made me feel incredibly conflicted because of several reasons. One, I felt like that video did come off condescending to some extent, which is something I don't want to do to people who disagree with me. It's frustrating because this issue in particular, I feel like it's not just a I'm right and you're wrong, like my team's the best team situation. It's more like your opinion is actively killing people. So it's hard for me to not be emotional with this, which is why I'm here. I'm glad you're here, some guy. I've rambled a lot, but I'm glad you're here to kind of bring me back when I get too heated on this kind of topic, but also share your point of view, share your opinions on this kind of stuff, and kind of help me be a voice of reason, right? So, yeah. You know, this guy, I know you didn't read all of the comments, but, you know, when I talked to you about this beforehand and, you know, we saw this, Like what were you? I guess what was your first like feeling when you felt this? Right, when I told you about the situation, like how did you feel and what did you think?
Um, so it's hard to describe it in like feelings because it's more of a logic based reaction I had, I feel like. Um, my first thought was, okay, this guy has a lot of sources, and if you look hard enough, you could find sources. You don't even have to look that hard, but you can find sources that go directly against what his sources say.
Mm-hmm.
So my first thought is, okay, well, someone's wrong here, or at least someone is more wrong in this situation.
Yep.
So then I'm left with, okay, what makes sense to me? Like, which of the, okay, let's say my side is wrong. I'm not, even if I'm wrong, I'm still not killing anyone. If your side is wrong, you are killing people. It's kind of like, you know, like it.
Yeah.
What would you rather be, wrong and harmful, or wrong and innocent?
Yep.
And regardless of how it all comes out, if it comes out that I was dumb, that I played it too safe during the pandemic, that I was a sheep during the pandemic, then fine. And I'm fine being a sheep. But I feel like I was being smart about it. The other side, I feel like, is very much like, oh, well, you pick your sources, you believe what you want to believe, regardless of who tells you otherwise.
Yep.
And I don't know. I'm rambling a bit, and I apologize, but it's complicated. It's a complicated issue.
It is.
So.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I immediately try to think about, you know, and it's, I don't like being right about this, but I can usually tell someone's political affiliation by their opinion of how they handle the pandemic. And I shouldn't be able to do that. I shouldn't be able to tell be like, oh, this guy's a Trump supporter because he doesn't believe in wearing masks. Because she's a Trump supporter because she's saying that the oxygen flow is taken away when you wear a mask, so it's actually a danger because you're breathing in, you know, CO2. These things are real though, and you know, I went and being the person that I am, I've done sales for years. I like to research people and figure out like how they think or what they think like. And sure enough, you know, I researched the same person that I'm referring to, and they do support Trump. And I don't want to bash him for supporting Trump. Like it's like saying you like a game, right? Like this is the logic that I have. I'm saying the game is bad. I'm not saying you're bad because you like that game that I think is bad, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Like I love the Metal Gear Solid series. There's people who complain about it being bad all the time. It's like, you think the game is bad? I feel bad that you can't enjoy the game, but I still think it's a good game. You can think it's a bad game, and you know that's okay. But I don't want people to feel insulted because I'm insulting the person that they idolize or they follow or whatever. So that said, this person did follow Trump, and that concerns me, right? Why are there people who believe something, like they believe that this COVID situation isn't to be taken as seriously as it should be on different levels, but those people tend to be Trump supporters or Republicans at the very least. That is incredibly concerning for me because one, I watch left and right and like unbiased media because the Democrats bother me a lot sometimes, not so much now, but normally during non-pandemic times, and the Republicans bother me because I'm neither one relate to what I feel is the best way to run this country, which is ever developing. I don't mind changing my opinion and evolving it based off of new information, which both parties seem to be slow at doing, but whatever. That's not the point. The point is that my mind sees people who don't take this pandemic seriously. Then I also associate them with a political party that is being incredibly frustrating right now on another level, because you can get into a whole fraud conversation. I'm not going to, but you could get into that. And this is the same situation. So what is happening where these people who are good, I have friends and family, I know people who believe this isn't serious. that are, also Republican. Why is this happening? And it has to be the sources of information that are being given to them. So it's not completely their fault. Assuming that they're wrong, it's not their fault, right? But like, there's so many questions that I have. Like, for one, how do we handle this once this is over? Because if the people who are taking the pandemic seriously are right, and more information comes out that cannot be refuted, that the people who were denying like the legitimacy of this issue, they were continuing to spread this issue regardless of the political affiliation, because you have like these kids that are throwing like COVID parties and everyone's catching it, and then surprise, surprise, everyone's actually catching it. So it's not just them, there's also other groups of people who just like want to party and have fun, and they don't belong to any political affiliation. It's just they're selfish people. But like, is there punishment for this, right? Because if you're doing this, you are potentially killing people, right? And then what happens when this information comes out and it's still being denied, right? What if like, hey, this is how COVID works. If you do these things, you are endangering other people. And those people are still like, no, you're stifling my freedom. Are they then like terrorists? Are they committing, is it similar to a situation to where if you have AIDS, you have AIDS and you're spreading it? Is it one of those situations? Because I personally feel like if you know that there's information that is out there that says that what you're doing right now is causing harm to other people, and you're denying that, and you're not getting in trouble for that, that isn't right. That's not justice. I don't understand how someone can deny logic. Like, oh, me shanking you with this knife, I don't believe it's actually going to kill you. Right? That's fake news. The world doesn't work that way. Our country doesn't work that way, at least.
But it also doesn't work on justice, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right. And I hate to go back to this, but it's a good point of being black in America. You instinctually know to not trust the government, to not trust the police. It's a something you're passed down to not trust authority, because you know that in the past there have been proven cases where the authorities, where the government have tried to stop black people from thriving. All the way back from slavery times, for some reason people think that once slavery was abolished, it was all sunshine and rainbows for black people, but it wasn't. And that stunted our growth over the generations of former slave owners' generations continuing to oppress black people, right? It's not a fun topic, but that's a reality. Those things happen. People in places of power and authority and leadership stop black people from thriving. And the relevance of this is that as we've gotten smarter as a country, as we've gotten more wise, as we've learned more and have had black people rise up, and people of color, white people, like all different colors and creeds coming together to say, hey, these things are injustices. We need to do something about this. It's not perfect, but we're still, we're getting there. We're getting there, right? And more stuff is coming to the surface. It's still an issue, right? And some people can choose to still deny that it's an issue, but clearly if enough people feel like this is an issue that needs to be talked about, then maybe there's something that needs to be done. But again, we have leadership that wants to deny this and has caused a lot of friction. But yeah, so going back to my point is that right now, in my mind, how I feel about these people, my point is to explain how I feel about it, right? Is that they are killing people with their actions while also hiding behind the guise of their beliefs. And how long is it going to take? Or what kind of situation is it going to take where two worldviews are so different on one country that it causes another pandemic? Because I've said this before, I think I said it offline, but I think that the distortion of information and wideness of opinions on how to handle this situation, people are just as much of a pandemic than the virus itself. Because people, if science is right, is continuing to spread the virus by not taking this seriously. I have some sources of conflict, right? The first one being the mask itself. In one of the comments, there's a couple of people that commented on this, and they said that the mask blocks your natural breathing by reducing the natural flow. I don't want to spend too much time on this one because I feel like there's enough examples already existing to refute this, but I also want to talk about my experiences a little bit with this particular topic because one, you could just look at doctors who are currently wearing multiple layers of masks and working long hours trying to deal with this pandemic, and if they catch it, we're all in trouble, right? But that's the easiest example to give, is that they're wearing masks. However, I live in Kalamazoo, where there are multiple big pharmaceutical companies that are doing research on this topic and have done pharmaceutical research for years and understand pathogens and other viruses, bacteria, that kind of stuff, right? I know people who work at these places, people that are very, very close to me. I don't know if they have any NDAs or anything like that, so I can't say, but there are people that I love that work at these companies that either are working on it and testing it, like they're testing the information, or they might just know people that are working on it just because it's big companies, they work on different things. Anyways, so I know people who have worn masks because they're working around animals. They're doing testing on animals. Opinions, I understand if you feel one way or the other, but the reality is they're testing these animals in the most humane way possible. They're wearing masks for long periods of time. That's very physical, mind you, because there's monkeys and other animals involved, right? So they're moving, they're lifting these heavy animals, they're wrestling animals while wearing this mask because, allergies, all kinds of stuff, but they're not having their oxygen flow. There's tons of information. I have sources. I'm going to have a lot of sources and links down below because anything that I'm saying, I want to make sure that I have at least some source of information. Now, the point here is that throughout all of these, he references information sources. And me being the crazy person that I am, I tried to look at as many sources as I could find because he didn't leave links, but he just copy and pasted. So I basically look at the title because he quoted the source. He or she, I don't know if it's a he or she, but this person quoted the source. And so I just Googled them, best I could find all of them and read them, and then also found information that was more up to date and researched it. So I don't want to keep re-explaining that, so I'm explaining that now. So I have some links to that, but that's not true. There's, I'm going to try to pronounce this properly, but I'm going to butcher it, but there's a pulmonologist, a doctor who specializes in respiratory systems, that said, I can assure you, pulmonologist.
Pulmonary. Well, maybe, but the base word is like pulmonary, I think.
Yeah, that would be the word. I guess I'm not gonna try to explain that, but basically he says that your oxygen flow, your breathing is fine. You're getting all the oxygen you need. Your carbon dioxide levels aren't rising. It's something else to remember is that people's you don't fully inhale and exhale unless you're consciously doing that. A lot of people take very shallow breaths naturally, so you're not getting a full inhale or an exhale. You may have to exert more force in order to get the oxygen through the mask, but it's very, very minimal. And again, it does beat catching the virus. But again, that's a misconception that a lot of people have been talking about. But it's like I've worn masks for long periods of time. I've know plenty of people who wear masks for long periods of time, and that's not the case. Like, there's some information that I think I'll circle back to, but I'll just mention it now. Is that I don't think he mentioned this, but I've seen people talking about it being unhealthy. Now, you got to wash your mask, or you got to replace your mask if you're wearing a disposable one. If you don't wash any of your articles of clothing or anything that you use that gets wet or has bodily fluids on it, yes, you're going to catch something eventually. It might not be COVID, but you might catch something if you're not cleaning your mask off. Like, I don't know what to tell you. That's common sense. But you wash your socks and your underwear, right? Like, either do a batch of masks. Like, we have a bunch of cloth masks, and we'll do like a batch, or we just hand wash it, and then dry it. We have solutions and stuff. So you got to take some extra steps. But again, like, this isn't just about you. It's about how you affect other people. So if you are catching COVID and you're wearing dirty masks, you're also potentially spreading that again. So you got to do your due diligence, wear masks, wash masks, or replace them if you're wearing disposable ones.
So there was one other thing that I wanted to discuss. It's there was another comment in the group, or in the video, that talked about, because the fact that the virus is smaller than the filtration capability of the mask.
Mm-hmm.
That they compared it to trying to trap flies with a chain link fence.
Yes.
To me, that's a very very much an oversimplification and very much wrong. First off, flies go under their own power. They have wings. COVID does not have wings. COVID is propelled by our
exhales, our coughing, our sneezes,
our breathing. Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't have a mind of its own to be able to navigate our world. Well, at least we hope it doesn't. It's not airborne yet, right? But the point is, if it hits part of the filtration of the mask, it's going to stick to it because it's a fiber. It's just like a napkin or a towel. It's going to absorb any of the liquid that is. Well, first off, COVID doesn't fly by itself. It's attached to our respiration droplets, whether it's spit or moisture or whatever. It's in that together, which does make that molecule a little bit bigger, so that it is a little more difficult for it to squeak through the mask. But the point being that that's a terrible analogy they gave, because first off, the size comparison of fly to chain link fence is way off. Chain link fence would be like a one dimension blocking, like a 1D or a 2D, two-dimensional blocking.
Yeah. So like X and Y. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, two-dimensional. So there's one layer of a chain link fence. The mask, if you've ever looked at like a close-up view of it, the masks are like multiple layers. It's like a piece of fabric. And I actually have a microscope here that I've zoomed into this stuff and seen that, like, oh, okay, so there's not like clear-cut holes straight through it. It's not like you're looking at a piece of pegboard. It's layer upon layer. Yep. So I don't like when people give bad analogies, especially when they fall apart so easily.
Yeah, that's a great point, because like you hit all the points. The stacking of the layers does make a huge difference, but even like that, it's like the moisture particles that the COVID is a part of is going to get stopped by the mask. And again, that's part of the reason why there is a percentage, because there's going to be some that stick to the mask, there's going to be some that get through that you might breathe off, but you're lowering the risk. And yeah, you're right, that is a terrible that analogy doesn't work. It falls apart because there's too many things to take into account. But the issue is something like that spreads very fast. You see a retweet or a share on the Facebook feed of something like a hot take like that, or a one-liner, what is the term, soundbite like that, where someone says something like that, someone in authority says something careless like that, and now you have people parroting that information, and it's not a good analogy. And anybody who knows anything about fabric or knows a little anything about like I went and read about this, right? Because I didn't know about this before, and I went and I was like, wait, like the sources that he quoted in it, and then some of the ones that I fact checked, they talked about that point and why that analogy would be bad if he had, that person had read all of the information. So that is a really important part. It's like if you are believing some sort of quote like that or making some sort of reference, I don't know if he made that up on his own or if he found this. It's more concerning if he found it somewhere else and shared it and is saying it to me, because I guarantee you he or she's not the only person that feels this way. There's going to be more people. I've heard other analogies that are just as inaccurate. So that's a really, really great point. Is that you gotta, I catch myself too. Like, I'm susceptible to this. And that's the thing, is that we have to be willing to be okay with being wrong, because media from both sides do lie to us. From unbiased media, sometimes they get it wrong. Not even like intentionally lying. Sometimes they just want to be first. Sometimes new information comes out, and not just about COVID, just in general. Like, this has been happening for years and years and years. We gotta be okay with being like, this was wrong, And this is the accurate story. Now that we've had enough people cross-referencing and case studies and stuff like that, and also with science specifically, we have to be like, new information has come out, and here is a new situation, right? Because science is always growing, and there's people who people who get mad at Pluto not being a planet, right? I fell into that category, and that my point is, it's a very emotional topic, but it's not a very logical topic, because if it was, we would get into the conversation of categorization and why it's not a planet. But most times people are just like, what? I grew up thinking Pluto was a planet, so it's still a planet in my eyes, right? That's the logic that we have. I had that logic. I know other people that had that logic. It's like, okay, it's still a planet to me. And it's like, at that point, you're consciously making a decision to forego what science says, and you're making your own decision about something that you know nothing about. I don't know anything about moons and stars compared to someone who's been studying it and has doctorates in it. It's an interest of mine. I'm not professional in it, right? So you got to be careful with like the things that you're absolutely positively sure about, because a lot of the things that I'm talking about, I'm saying it from the point of view of currently existing information that I have. But I am not a person who's married to this information if new information comes out, right? You have to be willing to adapt to that. And I just see so many people, a lot of religious people specifically, who are unwilling to acknowledge new science that comes out in their lifetime that either doesn't go with what their beliefs are currently, or just don't align with their worldview, whether it's religious or just stubbornness. We're growing, we're evolving, like not just us as human beings and as a society, but information and what information is revealed to us. Because I could get into a whole nother topic about this, but about why information grows. But if you know, if you don't, you don't. Like, do some research and figure that out. Another one I don't want to spend too much time on, that I hadn't heard this argument before, but there are people who say there are more suicide deaths this year than COVID, and I thought that was believable, but it's not true. I have some sources again that the numbers for suicide rates are way lower. Absolutely not true.
So while you're pulling that up, there's something that I would like to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
First off, for the mask to increase the amount of CO2 that you are intaking, the only way that would make sense in my mind is if the mask was actually blocking the CO2 molecules from leaving your mask. Right? Like how else would you how the mask doesn't produce CO2, you're producing the CO2 when you inhale, burn the oxygen in your blood, and then exhale through back out. So the only way it could increase your CO2 level would be by blocking the CO2 from leaving your body. So I did some research, and it's funny because like they think that it blocks CO2, but it doesn't block COVID, which that I don't understand how you do that. Like I don't understand how like mentally you think that it's able to block a molecule, but not a virus. But whatever. Just so I did some numbers research here. CO2 molecule is micrometer size, 0.33 nanometers. Yeah. So the carbon dioxide molecule is about 1,000 times smaller than COVID.
CO2 is much smaller than COVID.
Yes.
But somehow COVID slips through the masks, but the CO2 doesn't, is the logic that people have.
Yeah. Which I'm not saying that, but keep in mind I don't think that the mask would be able to stop 100% of COVID.
No, it reduces it.
And
no scientist has claimed that it does completely stop it, but both people wearing masks greatly reduces the risk of catching it, because you have two layers of filtration, two people's worth of filtration. There's tons of meters out, tons of graphs or visuals out there of people talking about no mask versus one mask versus like one person who has COVID wearing a mask versus one person who doesn't have the mask versus one person who doesn't have COVID wearing a mask versus one person who does versus both people wearing it. So they showed all those comparisons and the percentages that you would get it. Nowhere in any of those percentages has there ever been 0% if both people are wearing masks. So it's not a matter of, it's risk management. You're lowering the amount of risk. So if there's people who do believe that there's scientists claiming that masks completely prevent it, that's not what any scientist that I've come across has ever claimed. But you do have to remember that it does definitely reduce the risk of getting it. So
it's like a condom. It's not 100%.
Yeah.
Sometimes things slip through.
Yep. So again, CO2 is smaller than COVID. So remember that information, that if COVID can get through, CO2 can definitely get through, and oxygen can also get through. I think we're good on that one.
And there's no way, like, the amount of air that's trapped between your face and your mask, like, your lungs probably hold 10 or 20 times that amount in a normal breath. You know what I mean? Like, it's a tightly fitting thing. When you exhale, that has to go somewhere, and typically it goes through the filter of the mask. Or if you wear it with your nose sticking out, then I guess it goes straight down on top of the mask, and you're kind of, bypassing the whole filtration system.
Yeah. So another point would be people talking about how the suicide rates are higher than COVID. Not necessarily the case. So just for context, right now, the CDC talks about how it is currently, this is just in Michigan, it's 10,400 in Michigan alone. In the US, 285,000. Worldwide, it's 156 million. But the 285K is what we want to look at.
Is that COVID or suicide?
That is COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is COVID. I want to find the most updated one because the CDC has one, but I mean, we're still not done with the year so far. So, I mean, that could change, but let me find that number for you. Hey guys, quick update. I could not find any good numbers representing 2020 suicide count. I looked, and the best that I could find was anything from 2018. They didn't even have anything from 2019. I'm assuming that has to do with counting and confirming the cause of death and things of that nature. So the fact that someone was able to claim that the suicide rate is higher than the COVID deaths is kind of concerning because there's no statistics. I've checked the CDC, the AFSP, the American Health Ranking Organization, and a lot of other sources as well, and I couldn't find any numbers. I saw some blogs and articles talking about how the increase in the hotline, the suicide hotline, has increased, and suicidal thoughts and things of that nature. And of course, that's going to happen in such a depression right now. But just to let you guys know, I did not find any information, any numbers confirming that the deaths from suicides were higher than COVID-19. And I don't think we're going to find anything for the next couple of years because it seems like suicide counts are about 2 years behind. So use that information as you will. Again, this is one of the concerns that I have with people just saying information without having any reputable sources to back it up. All right, back to the main show.
That's a farce argument. The person made that was a blatant lie.
Yes.
I guess.
And this is a National Institute of Mental Health, right? So they're a reputable source as far as I'm aware, because they publish a lot of information on mental health. I'm sure I could find more information on that. Maybe the CDC will put out something soon. They had their figures from that weren't fully up to date, so I didn't want to check those for sure, but I want to find one that has something that's up to date. So that's a misconception that makes it look like, the people who are holed up at home, they're the ones that are, they're suffering from depression because they feel like they can't go out. But while that may still be the case, not 285,000 worth of people. It's not even over 100,000. So I'm not sure how that came to be, because I don't think he quoted a source for that one. Interestingly enough, but you could a quick Google search for like the CDC or the National Institute of Health, and you'll dismiss that theory or that idea completely. And again, I don't know where he got that information from. It could just be social media people sharing it, content creators, because this again is multi-layered, because you have reputable sources like Fox News and CNN, right? Left and right media. I've seen both of them over the years. They've been called out tons of times for misquoting information, trying to get it out there first. But now both sides they're clearly biased. But you see, like on Fox News, you have like Sean Hannity, talking about attacking the Democrats for doing one thing or believing another thing, whatever. Like, he's always doing that. He's always trying to be this person of like, I know what's right, and this is what this bad group of people are doing to attack us. I'm here to share you the stories and the bad things that people are doing on the other side, because we need to call them out. And then the same thing is happening on the left-hand side, where you have, what is that guy's name? Skinny guy. I like some of his interviews. I think some of his interviews are really good, but he also is definitely biased. There's tons of Democratic or left-leaning media sources that you can look at. I can't think of it right now. I wanted to say like John Oliver or Stephen Colbert, but they're comedians, so they kind of get a pass because they're still sharing information about the news, but they're basically bringing up information to make jokes about it. So they have made fun of both sides. So I don't want to include them in it, but it happens. But yeah, so I don't know with the suicide rate how that came to be, but we shall move on.
And honestly, that's that is a serious issue, one that is not being taken serious by our leaders.
Mm-hmm.
By like mental health care in our society is just looked down upon more than anything. Like how many I know of several people that were close to me at one point or the other who were afraid to say something about their mental health because of the mentality that brings, like the judgment that brings upon them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's unfortunate. And again, I'm sorry to pull us off topic, but
I think it's relevant enough. You could make an argument that it's still relevant to like misinformation and stuff like that, because depending on where you are in life, you might be more susceptible to certain kinds of information as well, or you might feel more helpless, and it greatly affects you. And obviously, like we talked about the suicide rate and stuff like that, but a lot of people are angry right now on multiple sides of the fence, right? I don't think it's a two-sided fence, because again, I'm an independent, so I feel very, very unrepresented in general all the time, plus being black, giant black weird nerd dude. There's a lot of different directions that it's coming from. But anyways, yeah, it's not just I feel like mental health isn't necessarily enough. I do agree, but I feel like on a broader scale, America specifically, other countries have this issue too, but I think that America has the best potential to be the best, because we're supposed to open our borders to all walks of life in order to make this country better. But I think at multiple times in history, since the beginning of America, we have had that idea but haven't upheld it because we're so ignorant culturally. I think the first example is black people. You have these people who are writing about the Declaration of Independence and talking about the pursuit of happiness for all men. Obviously, I think they meant men and women. Who knows? They might have just meant men then, but
yeah, who knows?
But that didn't apply to black people. That didn't apply to Native Americans. That didn't apply to women at the time, right? And as we got more culturally aware, because we kept getting called out, and I say we as Americans, but it was them, we learned and we changed our policies, as I was saying before. But mental health is wrapped into that. Cultural awareness is wrapped into that. Growing, like I don't know what the right term is. Sexual orientation, all the things that encompass the LGBTQ. There's conversations that need to be had more openly and more honestly from people who know about it, and there needs to be people who are in authority figures listening and not telling. That has been the habit over years and years and years, and we still haven't figured that out. We have to keep getting angry and forcing government to make change. We have to get violent. We have to like just be so loud that they can't not hear us. We have to get to the point of being obnoxious for change to happen, right? I don't think that's a sustainable and respectable method of growth. We grow through almost like a uprising, and then they give us what we want, and we kind of settle down for a little bit. It hasn't gotten better. I don't think we've gotten better, and like people want to blame the internet. I would make an argument that it may have expedited the issue of division in America, but it definitely isn't the fault at all. But you know, information or misinformation, just straight out lies, or just trying to be the first person to break a story, or covering a story but then spinning it on your own story, because that's what a lot of content creators do. You know, you have these YouTubers like Tommy Lahren, Steven Crowder, Brian Tyler Cohen, people on the left and the right that are like, here's this news story that you probably already heard about, and here's my take on how this person is evil and how they're wrong about the situation, and I'm also going to be very condescending about it while I'm talking about why they're wrong, but not really explaining it for people who don't already agree with me, only explaining it to people who already agree with me, and then anyone who disagrees, you're obviously an idiot. That perpetuates the issue because they're getting information from the official news sources and covering it and then putting their story on it, and then they have millions of followers, you know, millions and millions of followers on these channels, or thousands or hundreds of thousands. Those people have cultish followings. These YouTubers, you know, they worship the ground that these people walk on sometimes. And so, you know, they're building their own cult based around the political association or affiliation. And sometimes, you know, you have Hassan Abi. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, so I'm sorry. But he's also a streamer, YouTuber who's he's neither. I'm not sure what his actual political affiliation is, but I've watched some of his streams and watched his takes on videos, and he does the same exact thing, but he just makes fun of both political parties at the same time, or one or the other. And it's entertaining to watch that, but it's also just, it's sad that he does the same exact thing as all these other people. He just does it in more of a Twitch like streamer, gamer kind of format. All of this happens on a constant basis. Plus you have people retweeting constantly these stories one way or the other, while, you know, your friends and your family see it. And obviously every time you see it, like, that guy's an idiot. You know, and then maybe you get to the point to where you want to say something to them and it turns into an argument, and then you block that person, or you argue back and forth, or you make these passive aggressive jabs online every time you see a post from them, and they do the same thing to you. But like, most people don't ever get down to the core issue of why people disagree. They start to hold resentment for anyone who like has an opinion. You know, it's like you see a Trump supporter and there's people who are like, ugh, you're a Trump supporter. Like, there's people, and I've been in that category myself, where it's like, I'm instantly like, this person's probably racist, this person probably doesn't think COVID is serious, this person probably doesn't really care much about, you know, he probably is going to say all lives matter, and not understand why BLM is important, and not necessarily BLM itself, because I have critiques that I would give to the actual company, the actual organization of BLM, not the movement itself. But, you know, my point is that these people probably don't acknowledge that there is injustice in America for people who have a different shade of skin than them, right? I don't have a solution. The only solution that I have is sharing my point of view, sharing information and why these things are wrong, trying not to be condescending about it, and opening up the dialogue. So, you know, there are questions like, how do we have a conversation about this, right, before it's too late? Because one of us is right and one of us is wrong, in regards to taking COVID seriously and not taking COVID seriously. And what does happen if we're right? You know, we talked about that earlier. How do we continue to have freedom of speech and freedom of the press when there are sources of information that are sharing dangerous misinformation, lies, you know, fake news, alternative facts, whatever you want to call it? How do we handle that? How do we regulate that? How do we trust each other? How do we trust leadership anymore? Because I don't trust leadership, because, you know, it's easy to just blame Trump, right? There's a lot of people who are like, oh, once Trump is out of office, everything will be okay. I can't be that naive. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think this issue will clear up once Trump is out of office and Biden is in office, as long as things go smoothly, because there had to have been levels of people who either believed what he believed or were willing to sacrifice their own beliefs to align themselves with someone who believed this. And if, in fact, COVID is something to be taken seriously, what's the standard, what's the precedent we set for how we punish President Trump? Because at the least, it is gross negligence. It is incompetence that this person has been downplaying something that has been potentially killing. Millions of people have died from this. 200,000+ people have died in our country. If we don't punish him, what does that mean? In my eyes, that means that you can get away with whatever you want if you have enough money or power. And that's not American to me.
Well, there's where you're wrong, sir.
Oh, okay. Why?
Well, historically, that is nowhere near the truth. You know what I mean? Like, that's as American as apple pie, honestly. Do you have enough money to get yourself out of trouble? Yes. Then, by all means, do it again. Keep doing it until you don't have enough money. By no means should we be there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I believe that is the state of the world, of America at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Not to get too far off topic, but there was a recent update to something that is kind of relevant to this of punishment for doing the wrong thing, for lying, right? For those who don't know, I don't remember the names and I don't care to, but there was an actress who was on Full House. She grew up and she had a kid, and her two kids, and many other people who are rich paid their way into college. They faked having like a scholarship. They talked to this guy at a college. The guy that worked at the college was like an athletic coach, and he said, "Okay, I'll give you, if you pay me this much, which is less than tuition, I will fake a scholarship." I think it was a rowboating scholarship for at least one of the daughters. The daughter was also a YouTuber, and there's a whole other story about her being entitled and talking about how she just wants to go to parties. And but there was a conversation that she had. Her mom, I think, got 2 months, and the dad got maybe 5 months for faking their two daughters' ways into college. In my mind, that's kind of a slap on the wrist. They're taking the spot of someone who could have earned that position, and they were only able to do it. I don't know what happened to the coach that actually did it. I think he actually may have gotten fired, but that's fraud. That's not legal. That's not what you're supposed to be doing, right? And these people got slaps on the wrist because they were famous and or rich.
So let me ask you this. Was it a house arrest type deal, or they actually went to jail for months?
I'm not positive. I just know the mom got 2 months. I'll find out for you.
2 months. It's wrong. So, like, for something like that, honestly, if she got like 6 months, I think I would be okay with that as a punishment. The fact that the thing that bothers me is that I would have gotten years, probably.
Exactly my point.
Years.
Yes.
Months. I get it. That's, she didn't physically hurt someone. She took advantage of a system. It's fraud. It is fraud, right? But did someone actually get hurt, like physically in pain or physical, or no? I don't think anyone actually got hurt from it. So it's not necessarily a victimless crime, but I don't think there was harm, and so therefore I can see a lighter sentence. But I don't see it where if I'm famous, then I get different treatment. That's the part I don't like about it.
Yeah, and here's the issue that it gets me heated when I think about this, that richer people get less jail time. Mm-hmm. Now, if you think about this logically, richer people have access to more knowledge. They tend to be more in the know. But somehow they do something equally as bad as someone else who's less fortunate, and they get less jail time more often than not. Especially if they're high profile. But these are people who are more able to deal with the ramifications of not being able to work for an extended period of time and bounce back from it, versus people who get longer periods of time who also make less money. So I don't understand the logic. Who these people are usually smarter, more access to information, but to do the same thing that's bad. I feel like it should be a bigger punishment for them. One, because they're probably more in the know, and that means that if you knew something and you still did it, you definitely did it intentionally, and you weren't on hard times. So you, in my mind, you're a worse person. You're doing something bad. This is clearly biased. You can hear the anger in my voice. But logically speaking, how can someone who's more intelligent, I would argue that they're not more intelligent, but that tends to be the stereotype, that these same people have, is that they're more intelligent, they have more access to information, better trainers, better schooling, everything, right?
Yeah, so they certainly had every opportunity to be that way.
Yeah, it's like the issue with the affluence situation where the one kid got off like basically scot-free because he, I think he raped a young girl, and the argument was that he's young and he didn't know any better, but his dad was rich. How can, the whole argument was affluence. Affluenza is like the issue of the state of being so privileged that you don't know better. Like that's like the definition.
So that's like, all right. So,
and also her name was Lori Loughlin.
How come when I get pulled over, and I don't know the exact clause that says I can't do this thing, 10 times out of 10 they'll tell me that ignorance is no excuse for breaking the law.
Yeah, no, it's not.
But if I make enough money, or if I'm privileged enough, then I guess it is an excuse.
Yeah.
That's where that.
Yeah, and so maybe we'll dig more into this, because I think this could be a topic that we can really look at with more cases, because this is another issue that needs to be talked about. But to bring it back relevant to what we were talking about, is that the president is doing these things, and do we continue to set this precedent that we're not going to punish people because they might have too much power or too much money? I really hope that this person, in my mind, President Trump, if he, especially when news comes out that this information is valid and he's been denying it, because he's been part of the earlier meetings. He's been in the meetings. He can't deny that he didn't know anything. I can see him being like, oh, I didn't know. I was going off the information that they gave me. I made a call, blah, 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 blah. He's going to try to pull something like that and get away from this. And I encourage you guys to watch a documentary called The American Dream. Donald Trump, The American Dream. It kind of covers his upcoming, how he rose to fame and fortune. Now, something else I want you to understand is that I was born and have family in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And for those who don't know, that's a big part of when Donald Trump started to make his bounce back. His second bounce back, because he made 3 or 4 because he kept bankrupting himself. But both my parents at some time have worked for Donald Trump. My sister is named after one of Donald Trump's kids, because my dad idolized this guy, right? He did construction. He worked on Trump buildings. He helped build Trump buildings. I know who this guy is, and I've known him for a long time. Not in person. I've known about him for a long time because my dad talked about him a lot. I went to casinos all the time because my mom worked at them. My dad did construction, yada, yada, yada. So, I've had time to go back and watch the documentary and see a lot of the things, a lot of the videos and interviews that I've already seen, but look at him as an adult. And this person, he's been doing this for years, where he never takes responsibility for anything that goes wrong. He never acknowledges that anything goes wrong. He doesn't have empathy for other people. He's actually built buildings and borrowed millions of dollars from the city of New York and Atlantic City, didn't pay them back, and also didn't pay construction workers for the work that they were supposed to do, leaving them stranded with no money. This guy has done scumbaggy things for a long time and has displayed the fact that he doesn't have empathy for other people. He's only out for himself. That's how I feel about it. That's also the information that's been displayed before me. You can choose to deny that, and I'm willing to know your take on it. But this all trickles down because he says something, and everyone else that agrees with him spreads that information. So while he's not entirely to blame for this, I do believe that he has been a huge part in spreading this, because he has people, he has people who are, worshiping him, doing this number, for people who are watching the video, the we're not worthy type stuff, like people who see this guy as like the second coming of Jesus, and that's not an exaggeration. There's I think these are usually crazy white old ladies saying this, but they're human beings too, and they believe this. And that just trickles down. That just trickles down all the way to the individual, and they're the ones that are getting screwed over. Because here's the thing. I'm not mad because I'm right and you're wrong. I'm mad because you're killing yourself and you're killing others if you're not taking the situation seriously. Until information has come out, like unless there's a world conspiracy that COVID isn't dangerous, and somehow the government and every other country is covering this up, that it isn't it's not dangerous, then fine, I'll change my opinion. I'm open to changing my opinion with new information. Keep in mind, I'm not biased towards left or right. However, something that's not surprising is I think it was I gotta post a link. I gotta make sure I find this, but more countries have been coming out saying there's been more cases of COVID because they've been downplaying how many cases they've had. I don't find that surprising. I believe it was either Russia or China. I want to say it was one of those, and then a couple other countries that the numbers are coming out that it's like, oh no, it's actually way higher. They just have been lying about it. I don't think these are countries that have been taking like mass situations seriously. But either way, like this situation is scary, right?
Yeah.
New news may come out where like it is so scary that masks don't stop it. But it's you still need to like not be close to other people. New information is coming out. I've heard, I haven't seen a reputable source for this, but one of my friends did mention that the way it does replicate is that, or the way it acts to some extent is that it stays on you for a longer period of time, and eventually you just get more and more of it to the point to where you finally actually like get sick from it. I can't confirm that with a source just yet. But that was something that was really interesting that I found out about. But I want to at least preface that because I want to make sure I have at least one viable source, more than one for like anything that I mention, because I don't want to just talk out of my ass. But I also do have personal experiences and knowledge on some of these topics, not professional when it comes to like any of this, but just access to information and stuff like that. So either way, the thing that I want is for us to be like, hey, I believe all this stuff right here, and you believe all this stuff right here. We need to figure out like why is this the case, right? Who is lying to us? What information are you like? We need to find some way to figure out how we can talk to each other and like learn. The best thing I can do now is I want you guys. I don't want you to just quote your sources at me. I mean, share your sources and share the links to them, please, if you're going to quote sources, so it can be a little bit easier for me rather than doing hours and hours of looking for the sources that they're referencing. But I want you to tell me, like, your experience. Like, why do you believe this, right? Because I can backtrack. I have always been somebody who has questioned everything to the point to where it bothered my parents. I've always been curious about how things work. I grew up Christian. I'm no longer a Christian because
Because you question things?
I question things. Yeah. I don't want to be offensive because I know, like, everyone has their beliefs, but from my point of view, I think, the Bible and most other religions are like more of a personal development, spiritual, like guidance sort of thing, and less historically accurate. I don't believe these deities or these people existed. I think that maybe it might have been embellished, but either way, there's no facts for like the things that they're talking about. I'm not atheist for people who have that question. I would say more agnostic because I'm open to either possibility. I'm open to there being a God, but I also don't think that if there is a God, it's not in any Bible. It's not written in any book that we have on earth. That's my personal thought. You're free to have yours. However, what I want from you guys is to share what you think. Let me get back to my point. Religion aside, I've always questioned things. I've always liked learning, and my opinions have changed and evolved over the years. It's like the reason I don't believe in a flat Earth is there's too much information. There's too much science that exists currently that wouldn't work if the world was flat. So I don't believe that's the case. I'm always learning and evolving and talking to people, and I've talked to hardcore Republicans. I've talked to left-leaning people. I've talked to hippies. I've talked to cops. I have friends in all these categories: military, corporations, homeless people, people who live out of their van, people who are intentionally homeless, or not just like on hard times, but their belief is that they just want to wander the world and do what they want to do. You and I, Sumguy, we've talked about, we talked to all walks of life when we lived in San Diego, right? We got the chance, contrast is, to me, one of the key factors in accepting other people's lifestyles, understanding and taking a walk in their shoes, understanding how they think, why they think that way. I do think there needs to be a line, but that's an aside. But that way of thinking is how I've gotten to where I am now. It's also why I'm not a Democrat or Republican, because I think that there are solutions that don't have to screw over other people and don't have to impede too much on our freedoms. And I think that's something that needs to evolve and change. And I'm always learning about new things, about how the money system works, how the jurisdiction, just how different systems and political systems work as I've learned more and gotten more into politics. But nonetheless, what I want you guys to do as listeners is take some time to type this out. Don't just yell at me and tell me I'm wrong for no explanation other than like quoting some sources. Let me know how you came to that conclusion, why you feel that is the case, and maybe we can go back and forth from there, because I've already shared some information. So I think at the very least, if you're going to bring up some points, make sure that you're taking into account the points that I've already hit. And if you have counter information for why I'm wrong, like the mass situation, being 0.3 microns. I know the mask is like 1.5 microns, and I think it's like anywhere between 0.33 to like 0.15 microns, something along those lines. But like, let me know where you're, like, quote your sources and explain to me like where you're coming from, right? Because I think that any issue can truly be solved if you have a real debate. Now, a real debate isn't what we've seen on TV. A real debate is two people willing to acknowledge what the other person's saying, but two people also being honest with what they're saying. Like, don't talk out of your ass and just say things that you're making up. Don't tell me I'm wrong without having any information and just attacking my character. I'm not trying to attack your character because of what you believe, so don't attack my character because of what I believe. Come at me with some logic, some sound reason as to why you believe what you believe. We can go back and forth. I think there should be two victors. There's one person who probably had the majority of right points, and there's another person who learned from this experience. But hopefully both people learned from the experience, and maybe they're both right to some extent. With this situation in particular, I think it's a little bit more clear cut. Contradict myself a little bit, but yeah, I think that we're not going to fix this by trying to kill each other, and I want us to get past this. I want us to get to a semblance of a normal life that's possible. I'm starting to believe less and less that's normal, and this is how we're going to communicate via the technology that we're using. So we damn well better learn how to use it to the best of its ability. So let's use it to have a conversation. I'll do another episode like this if I need to respond. I'll do more homework and research so that I know what the hell I'm talking about, because this is important. This is more important than talking about video games. This is more important than talking about fighting games. I think this is just as important as talking about personal development, because personal development doesn't matter if you're not alive to live it. And if you either being in jail for killing somebody else with COVID, because that's you're a weaponized person, right? You are a walking bioweapon. I guess a bioweapon is usually walking, but anyways, if that is to be the case, which I do believe. Anyway, I know this was kind of a hopefully this wasn't too preachy. It is a topic that I'm just very, very passionate about, and the fact that one of my listeners thought this way, I don't think in itself was concerning, but it made me not want to just be an asshole to this person. And I don't want to just call them out, because one of the points that he or she hit was that they're staying anonymous because there are people in his FGC who would ostracize them. Ostracize that person for thinking this way. And I feel conflicted in that, because on one side, these people are probably doing this because they feel like you're a danger to them. like you're a danger to their well-being because you're not taking this seriously. And I think there's some argument to being mad. Like most times it's like, people talk about healthcare and how that should be handled, and people want to like just start scrapping. They want to start fighting over that topic. I don't think that's justified. But something like this where people are dying, I understand why people don't want to associate themselves with people who aren't taking this issue seriously. And then it's also hard for people who don't take the situation seriously to associate themselves with people who are taking it seriously, because people who take this seriously are not going to be around people who are not willing to respect this. So it's a forced separation of two different like ideologies, right? So it's important to understand. But that said, I would like to be a place where people like this can share their opinion, even though I do disagree. I want this country to be in a place where we can say, I disagree, here's why. Let me also hear your point of view, right? We're not there, but I think we can get there. That said, some guy, anything else that you want to talk about or add on? But anyways, that said, I think we've talked on for long enough. I could talk about this for longer, but it's such an important topic to talk about because of the reasons that I mentioned before. That said, I want your input, so make sure that you're talking, leaving comments, whether this is on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, whether you're in America or in another country, because apparently I have a lot of like European and like I have listeners in Australia, I have listeners in Germany, I've seen like Jordan and Germany, and like some Africa, Middle East. So you guys, for the few of you that are listening out there, I'd love to know your perspective. So if you listen to this episode, please, I want to know what's going on from your point of view in your country versus like what you're seeing about America, because I know America looks like an idiot to the rest of the world, at least from the sources of information that I get. So I would love to know from a listener's point of view, like what you think about this topic. If you agree with me, if you disagree, try to be respectful about it. But yeah, that's all I have for this. Any last thing from you, some guy?
No, I think that's it. I absolutely if you're not in the country, we definitely want to hear from you. I'm eager to see some real world opinions of America at this point.
Cool. All right. Well, that said, thank you guys so much. Again, my name is The Philosopher. I'll have all the links down below. I'm not going to do the whole spiel this time because I'm ready to wrap it up. But thank you guys so much for listening. This has been an important topic for me to talk about. Stay tuned for more of this. If you do like this kind of content, let me know. I'm still trying to figure out where this is going to fit long term. But for now, this is the home of these topics until I figure out something else. So that said, thank you guys so much, and I will see you all in the next one.